I used to believe love was something loud. Fireworks. Grand gestures. A story you told people with a smile because it sounded impressive. But with them, it was quiet. It was the sound of keys on the kitchen counter at the end of a long day. The weight of their shoulder leaning into mine when the world felt too heavy. The way their laugh filled a room without trying to. That kind of love doesn't announce itself. It just settles in and becomes part of who you are. We built our life out of small, ordinary things. Morning coffee that always went cold because we talked too much. Notes left on the table that said nothing important, just reminders that someone had been there before you woke up. Nights where we lay in the dark, not even touching, just breathing in the same space, feeling safe in the silence. I told myself that was what happiness looked like. Steady. Reliable. Real. They knew me in a way no one else ever had. The version of me I didn't show to friends, to strangers, to anyone who only saw the surface. They knew my fears, the ones I laughed off in public. They knew the stories I avoided telling because they still hurt. And I knew theirs. The memories they carried like old scars. The dreams they pretended didn't matter anymore. We shared those things like secrets, like fragile glass we trusted each other not to drop. We talked about the future the way people do when they assume it's guaranteed. Not in grand plans, but in casual sentences. One day, we should, maybe next year, we could. Those words felt solid, like bricks we were laying down without even realizing we were building something permanent. I could see a version of my life where nothing changed. Where we stayed like this. Comfortable. Familiar. Ours, but even in the middle of all that certainty, there was a quiet space inside me I didn't know how to name. Not emptiness. Not unhappiness. Just a feeling that something in me was still reaching for something else. I never told them about that part. I didn't even tell myself. I buried it under routines and affection and the comfort of being wanted. There were moments when I caught myself watching them from across the room, thinking about how easy it would be to stay forever. How simple it would be to never make a choice that hurt. They would look up and smile, and that feeling would disappear, replaced by warmth and the familiar sense of belonging. I took that as proof that everything was fine. That love, real love, didn't need anything more. We had our arguments, like anyone does. Small ones, mostly. About time, about work, about things that didn't really matter. They never lasted long. One of us would reach out, the other would meet them halfway, and it would end in laughter or quiet understanding. I remember thinking how lucky we were to be so good at fixing things before they broke. There was one night I still think about. We were sitting close, not touching, just sharing the same air. They asked me, softly, if I was happy. Not in a casual way. In a way that meant they really wanted to know. I answered without thinking. I said yes. And in that moment, I believed it. I believed the word as it left my mouth. That I didn't know then that happiness can exist at the same time as temptation. That you can love someone and still be vulnerable to something that feels new. I didn't know how easily a life you're proud of can start to feel like something you're just maintaining. At the end of each day, I would come back to them. Their voice. Their presence. Their certainty in us. And I told myself that as long as I kept choosing them, nothing else mattered. That whatever I felt inside, whatever questions lingered in the quiet parts of my mind, would eventually fade. That I thought love was a shield. I didn't realize it was also a doorway. I didn't go looking for them. That's the lie people tell when they want to sound guilty in a dramatic way. The truth is simpler and more dangerous. They just appeared, in the middle of a normal day, in a place where nothing important was supposed to happen. A conversation that started with something small. A shared complaint. A laugh that lingered half a second longer than it needed to. At first, they were just another voice in the noise of my life. Another face I would forget as soon as I walked away. But I didn't forget. I found myself replaying the way they spoke, the way they looked at me like they were actually listening instead of waiting for their turn to talk. It felt flattering in a quiet, harmless way. I told myself that was all it was. We started talking more. Not about anything serious. Just the kind of things you share when you don't plan on it meaning anything. Music. Memories. The little frustrations that don't deserve a whole conversation at home. They had a way of making even the boring parts of my day sound interesting when I said them out loud. And I liked how easy it felt to talk without thinking about what each word meant. There was a moment when I noticed I was checking for their name. Waiting for it to appear. That should have been my warning. Instead, I smiled to myself like it was a private joke. I told myself it was nice to have someone who didn't know me the way my partner did. Someone who didn't carry the history, the expectations, the weight of everything we had built. They didn't see the version of me that paid bills and planned weekends and worried about the future. They saw the version of me that laughed easily, that spoke without measuring every sentence. With them, I felt lighter, like I had stepped out of a role I didn't even realize I'd been playing. The conversation started stretching into the night. I would tell myself I was just passing time, just avoiding sleep. But I knew I was choosing to stay. Choosing to keep typing instead of turning my phone off. Choosing their words over the quiet breathing of the person beside me. They asked questions my partner never did anymore. Not because my partner didn't care, but because they already knew the answers. What did I want, really? What did I miss about who I used to be? What scared me about the future? I answered those questions like I had been waiting for someone to ask them. I didn't realize how intimate honesty can be when it's given to the wrong person that I still told myself I wasn't doing anything wrong. There was no touch. No promises. Just words. Just understanding. I convinced myself that as long as I came home, as long as I said the right things and played my part, nothing else mattered. I didn't see how my attention was already drifting away, piece by piece. One night, they said something simple. That they liked the way I thought. That talking to me felt different. I stared at the words longer than I should have. My heart didn't race. It didn't need to. It just settled into a warm, dangerous comfort. I typed back something careful, something that could still be read as harmless. But I knew what was underneath it, that I started noticing the distance at home. Not because it was new, but because I was finally comparing it to something else. The familiar felt quieter. The routine felt heavier. I would listen to my partner talk and catch myself thinking about how the other person would have reacted, what they would have said. That thought scared me. I pushed it down and pretended it didn't exist. There was a night when my partner reached for me and I hesitated, just for a second. They didn't notice. But I did. That second felt louder than any argument we had ever had. It felt like a line I had stepped over without even moving. The third person didn't ask for more. Not directly. They didn't have to. The space between what we said and what we meant was already filled with something unspoken. With every message, every shared secret, every moment I chose them over the truth, I was building something I didn't want to name. That I told myself I was still in control. That I could stop whenever I wanted. That this was just a phase, just a distraction, just a way to feel something new without losing what I already had. I believed that lie because it was comfortable, but deep down, in the quiet place I tried not to visit, I knew this wasn't innocent anymore. I knew that attention had turned into attachment. That curiosity had turned into connection. And that love, the real kind waiting for me at home, was no longer the only thing holding my heart. That I didn't stop. I didn't step back. I didn't say enough is enough. That I stayed right where I was, standing between what I had and what I shouldn't have wanted, pretending I wasn't already choosing. There was a day when everything slowed down, like the world was waiting for me to make a decision. I didn't know it yet, but that was the moment. The one I would replay in my head later, over and over, wishing I had chosen differently. That my partner looked at me the way they always did when something felt off. Not accusing. Not angry. Just searching. It's a look you give someone you trust, hoping they'll meet you halfway. They asked if I was tired, if work had been too much, if something was bothering me. The door was open. Wide enough for the truth to walk through without forcing itself. That I almost told them. I felt the words rise up, heavy and urgent, pressing against my chest. I imagined saying it out loud. Imagined the relief of not carrying it alone anymore. I imagined their face changing, the warmth draining out of it, the space between us filling with something cold and permanent. That image stopped me. So I smiled. I said everything was fine. I said I was just thinking about the weekend, about plans, about nothing important. They nodded, like they believed me, or maybe like they wanted to. That's the thing about trust. It makes lying easier because the other person does half the work for you. Later, my phone vibrated in my pocket. A simple message. Just a few words, asking how my day was going. It shouldn't have meant anything. But it did. It felt like a hand reaching out in the dark, finding me when I was trying to hide from myself. That I didn't respond right away. I told myself I needed space. That I needed to be present where I was. I watched my partner move around the room, comfortable, unaware, living inside the version of our life they still believed in. The contrast felt sharp, almost painful. When I finally picked up my phone, I didn't hesitate anymore. I typed back. I asked a question of my own. And just like that, the moment passed. The door closed. The truth stayed where it was, locked behind my ribs. The third person started pushing, gently at first. Not in words, but in tone. In the way they talked about what we shared, like it was something special. Something that didn't happen to everyone. They asked what I wanted. Not just from them, but from my life. From my future. From love itself. That I didn't give them a clear answer. I lived in the space between yes and no. I told myself that as long as I didn't say the wrong thing, I wasn't really doing anything wrong. I convinced myself that silence was safer than honesty. There was another moment. A smaller one, but just as heavy. My partner reached for my hand in public, like they always did. A simple gesture. Familiar. Grounding. I held on, but my mind was somewhere else, replaying a message I hadn't answered yet. That's when I realized how far I had drifted without ever leaving the room. That night, my partner asked me again if everything was okay. They said they felt like I was slipping away, just a little. They didn't say it like a complaint. They said it like a fear. Like they were trying to hold on to something that was already loosening in their hands. That I could have ended it right there. I could have told the truth, cut off the other connection, faced whatever came next with whatever courage I had left. I knew it. I felt it, clear and sharp, like a line drawn in front of me. Instead, I chose the easier path. I told them I loved them. And I meant it. That's the part that still confuses me. I meant it even as I kept the secret. I meant it even as I kept answering messages that shouldn't have mattered as much as they did. The third person said they missed me. Not in a dramatic way. Just those two words, sitting on my screen like a quiet confession. I stared at them for a long time. I thought about what it would mean to say the same thing back. I thought about what it would cost that I didn't say it. But I didn't say goodbye either. From that point on, everything felt like a balancing act. I became careful with my time, my words, my expressions. I learned how to live in two emotional spaces at once. How to laugh at home while my phone stayed face down on the table. How to listen while my mind waited for the next vibration in my pocket. That I told myself I was protecting my partner. That the truth would only hurt them. That staying silent was a kind of kindness. But deep down, I knew who I was really protecting. I knew whose comfort I was choosing. There was no dramatic kiss. No moment that could be pointed to and labeled as the exact second everything broke. Just a series of small choices, stacked on top of each other, each one easier than the last. The moment I could have stopped, it didn't feel like a moment at all. It felt like a long, quiet stretch of time where I kept choosing not to act. Where I kept choosing to stay in the space I had created between honesty and desire, and by the time I realized what I had done, I was already standing on the other side of the line, looking back at a version of myself who still believed they were in control that I wasn't. I had made my choice that I stayed. After that, nothing exploded. There was no dramatic confrontation, no raised voices, no moment where everything finally spilled out into the open. Life just kept moving, and I moved with it, carrying what I had done like a weight I pretended not to feel. At home, everything looked the same. The same rooms. The same routines. The same quiet evenings where we sat close without really touching. But something in me had shifted, and I couldn't unfeel it. I started measuring my words, my reactions, my expressions. Every laugh felt rehearsed. Every "I love you" felt like it was being tested, not by them, but by me. The third person didn't disappear. They lingered in the background of my days, in my thoughts, in the spaces between conversations. We didn't talk as much, but the connection didn't fade either. It became something quieter, heavier. Like a memory that refuses to stay in the past. Every time my phone buzzed, my chest tightened, even when it wasn't them. My partner noticed the changes before I did. They always had that way of sensing things I tried to hide. They became softer with me, more careful. Like they were walking around something fragile they couldn't see. That hurt more than anger ever would have. Their kindness made my silence feel louder. There were nights when I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to their breathing beside me. I would think about how easily I could reach over, how simple it would be to close the distance, to remind myself of what was real and solid in here. Sometimes I did. Sometimes I didn't. And in those moments of hesitation, I felt the full cost of what I had allowed into my life. The third person became a question I never answered. What would have happened if I had chosen differently? If I had walked away when I still could? I didn't pursue them. I didn't end things either. I let the connection exist in a place where it couldn't grow but wouldn't die. A ghost of a path I never took. My partner started talking about the future again. Small things. Plans that assumed I would be there. I nodded. I smiled. I agreed. Each promise felt heavier than the last, not because I didn't want them, but because I wasn't sure I deserved to keep making them. There was a moment, weeks later, when they asked me if I trusted them. The question caught me off guard. I said yes, of course I did. They held my hand and told me that was all they needed. I felt something break inside me then. Not loudly. Just a quiet crack that spread slowly through everything I thought I was holding together, that I started to wonder what love actually meant. Was it the choice to stay, even when you know you failed? Or was it the courage to tell the truth, even if it destroys what you're trying to protect? I didn't have an answer. I still don't. The third person faded into my past, not with a goodbye, but with a silence. Our conversations stopped. The connection dissolved into something I could almost pretend had never happened. Almost. But sometimes, out of nowhere, I would remember a laugh, a question they asked, the way they made me feel seen in a way that was different, dangerous, and real. At home, my partner kept loving me in the same quiet way they always had. They trusted me with their fears, their hopes, their plans. I listened. I supported them. I stood beside them like nothing had changed. And on the outside, nothing had, but inside, I lived with two versions of myself. The one they believed in. And the one who knew what I had done, what I had almost done, what I had chosen not to stop. Those two versions never fully met again. Sometimes I would catch my reflection in a window or a mirror and wonder which one I was looking at. The person who stayed. Or the person who ran without ever leaving. That I thought staying would make things right. I thought silence would protect what we had built. But as time went on, I started to realize that the cost of not telling the truth wasn't paid all at once. It was paid in small moments. In the way I hesitated before answering simple questions. In the way I held back when I wanted to be fully present. In the distance that grew, not between us physically, but somewhere deeper. There was no clean ending. No resolution. Just a life that continued, shaped by a choice I made when I decided not to make one. And now, when I think back to the moment I could have stopped it, I don't just wonder what would have happened if I had spoken. I wonder who I would have been.